Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Megan True, Curatorial Assistant in the Department of Painting and Sculpture of Europe here at the Art Institute of Chicago. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the museum and tonight's conversation, Caillebotte, Sailing and Society, from Mackinac to the Seine. Gustave Caillebotte's passion for boating and shipbuilding marks an important intersection of art, sport, and society. Thank you for being here tonight for a lively conversation on how boating emerged as a gentleman's sport in both France and the United States, particularly right here on Lake Michigan. I want to express our gratitude to the exhibition sponsors for their support of this exhibition. Lead support for Gustave Caillebotte, Painting His World, is generously provided by the John D. and Alexandra C. Nichols Family Foundation. Raymond James is the lead corporate sponsor. We thank them, alongside all of our other exhibition supporters, for their generous support. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for this evening's program, Gloria Groom and Madeline Crispell. As the chair and Winton Green Curator of Painting and Sculpture of Europe and Executive Director of Initiatives in France at the Art Institute of Chicago, Gloria Groom has been involved in numerous major monographic exhibitions and their accompanying catalogs, including Gauguin, Odilon Redon, Caillebotte, Renoir, Manet, Seurat, and Toulouse-Lautrec. Madeline Crispell is a curator and historian whose work centers material culture, decorative arts, and the built environment. Currently, she is the curator at the Chicago Maritime Museum, where she has explored the legacy of the maritime industry on Midwestern architecture. As we begin, a brief reminder to please silence your mobile devices. Now, please join me in welcoming our speakers to the stage.
Okay, welcome. I feel this is my fourth time up. You guys are going to get really bored, but I'm having such a good time with this exhibition, and thank you so much. How many of you have seen the exhibition already? Yay. Okay, great. That'll make this more interesting. Let me start out with the, let's just say I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. We do not have yachts, and we do not have yacht clubs. So I know nothing. But I do know a little bit about Gustave Caillebotte, and so my goal tonight is to have a conversation, to bring in the exhibition, a part of his career that some of us who have grown up looking at Paris Street Rainy Day, we don't really think about his yachting paintings, and which he did a lot of in the last 12, 15 years of his life. And so it's fun to focus on this part of his career. And I'm delighted that Madeline Crispell is here because she knows so much about boats. Well, you do. I mean, compared to me.
I get seasick. The sailors in the audience, it's in a historical way I know about these boats.
So in the next 45 minutes, we're going to just explore a little bit about trying to make the link between what's going on in France in the 1880s, what's going on in the 1890s, and what's going on in Chicago. So let's start at the beginning. So Caillebotte, as you know, was independently wealthy. His family not only had the mansion that he moved into when he was 12 years old in Paris, but he also had a family home as of 1860, and this was the mansion that the family bought, fully furnished, where he would spend his summers until both of his parents died and the brother sold the house. And this was where he first got his excitement about water sports, because the Yare River, and this is in the town of Yare, runs right next to the property, and this is where Caillebotte first started with his boating fun activities, boating for competition. It's all happening in this childhood home, and there he is. Caillebotte, as you've noticed in the exhibition, never smiles. And so you will see him throughout with this kind of grim look. But here he is with boating friends. They all have these kind of pith helmet straw hats. And I think if you've been to the exhibition, you know that we actually had to have that made by a milliner at the school because it's the one hat that was impossible to find. So I'm assuming It's a very niche little community around his home at Yare, around his summer home. And this is where they're still wearing those little pith helmet. He makes the Yare River look like it's something big. It's not. It's more of a riverette. But he's interested in the act of rowing, the musculature, the athleticism, all of which was being touted by the government as part of, Republican values that men should be physically healthy, and physical health helps your mind, and being on the water and the contact with nature. All of these things were part of a masculine identity in the 1870s when Caillebotte is beginning to paint. As of 1872, he starts, and then he starts exhibiting with the Impressionists. And these were paintings that he did in the summer when he is joining the Impressionists. And as you can see, these are very small boats. They're called périssoires, which translates as kind of perishable, because they're very lightweight, but they're also dangerous because they can easily topple over. And what's interesting about this is this is one type of canoeing, or rowing. And they're very anonymous. He doesn't show their faces. He's got them down. It's their pith helmet, straw hats that really is the subject. And they have no personality. This is the usual way of showing rowing, canotage, in canoes. And canoes were meant to be rowed, and usually, as in the painting on the left with the French boat a couple of years ago, and is one of the stars of the exhibition, the title that Caillebotte gave it is Partie de bateau, so the boating party. And boating party kind of refers to, this kind of flirtatiousness. And indeed, in Impressionist paintings, in Guy de Maupassant, these are about sailing, but usually sailing with a man rowing and the woman, languishing, reading a book, talking, whatever, as you see in the Renoir, where it's a form of socialization, not the athleticism and the exertion that we saw in the other skiffs, the périssoires, that on the Yare River. And I think it's also interesting that, as I said, in the périssoire, they're very anonymous. They don't have a personality. And yet, in this major painting of a canoer, you get the sense it's a portrait. We don't know who it is, but it's definitely someone, and it's a man who has felt comfortable enough to take off his jacket and to be rowing, but it leaves his top hat on incongruously. And you assume that the person in front of him is going to be maybe a woman, but it's not. It's the artist himself. So there's this kind of really interesting tension when you think of where is Caillebotte. He's on the boat with this very sophisticated and kind of an avatar for Caillebotte himself of a certain cultural, of a certain social class. And so I love the way that he starts out. And you see in the background the anonymous boaters with those pith helmets and the white jersey. So this is where he gets his start of loving water sports, and this is where I'm going to hand over the clicker to, one more, sorry, not handing it over yet. So if you've been to the exhibition, you know that we've tried to recreate what it was like in the Caillebotte home to be on the water, and his interest in all of these different swimming, boating, fishing on the water. And that's the beginning of Caillebotte's interests before he becomes a yachtsman in the last part of his life.
So Gloria talked to us a little bit already about how the 19th century is this period where we see the professionalization and organization of these different recreational activities. A lot of different sports see their formal versions start in the 19th century. Rowing, yachting, sailing. This is no exception. We see this happening at basically the exact same time in the Chicago area that we see it happening also in France. So this is a postcard from later in the 19th century. This is of the Lincoln Park Lagoon. It's one of the rowing teams that operated there. The reason we wanted to start with this, the first rowing match that we have a record of in the Chicago area is 1858. That's incredibly early. That's, only 20-some years after the city at all was established. And it was an international competition, believe it or not. The Metropolitan Rowing Team of Chicago went up against the Shakespeare Rowing Club of Toronto, and Toronto won, but it gives you an idea. Already in 1858, there's enough of an infrastructure in Chicago, enough of an interest in maritime recreation, in water sports, that you're able to have an international rowing competition. Now, Gloria asked you how many of you had been to the exhibition already. I have a question too. How many of you have been to the Chicago Maritime Museum? Fewer hands are going up in the audience.
But we're in a museum. We're in a museum, so.
That's right. I appreciate you coming to a museum here. I hope to see you all down in Bridgeport. That is where the museum is located. The body of water that the museum is on, you will see right behind me, that is Bubbly Creek. If any of you have read your Upton Sinclair, you are familiar with Bubbly Creek, or the heart of the Chicago meatpacking industry. The warehouse where the Bridgeport Art Center is, where the museum is located, was at just the entrance to the waterway where you get to the Union Stockyards. So, of course, in the late 19th century, this is an open-air sewer for that industry. And that is an industry with refuse that deteriorates. And so over time, as the refuse decomposed, it bubbled. And so, ew is right, but also interesting. And so it's a perfect place to have a museum about Chicago's maritime history. You might expect Navy Pier. In fact, when we were founded back in 1982, that's where we thought we might be. Mayor Harold Washington, when he was thinking of how to redo Navy Pier, he wanted there to be a maritime museum. And so the Chicago Maritime Society forms to accommodate that. So there will be a board and collections when it's time for that to happen. When Navy Pier eventually opens much later, they're no longer quite as interested. And so we end up moving around different places until we get our location in Bridgeport. We've been there for 10 years now. But that industrial history of the waterways in Chicago is a big part of what we talk about, and that's a big part of what we associate Chicago's maritime history with. Chicago is an incredibly important port. We think of Illinois as landlocked, but we were the busiest port in the country in 1880 for quite a long time after that. We are busier than New York, San Francisco, and New Orleans combined. It's because,
Whoa.
I know, that's the right response. It's because we were a leg of everybody else's journey. So in 1848, the year that Caillebotte is born, that is when the Illinois and Michigan Canal opens up. And that directly connects rivers, which in turn connect the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes. Chicago becomes the crossroads of the country. Our maritime trade is hugely important and intermodal. The railroads come up because the maritime industry is so important. Now, this is 1868. This is, some 20 years after the I&M Canal was built. Chicago's population in that period went from about 4,000 to almost 300,000. And a lot of those people who are moving to Chicago because of the opening of the Erie Canal are coming from the Mid-Atlantic, from New England, and a lot of them are bringing traditions of yachting and yacht clubs with them. And so even though this lithograph is showing you a very hustling, bustling industrial port, recreation is already happening on the waterways in Chicago in this period. Like I said, this is 10 years after that rowing competition. The Chicago Yacht Club, which is celebrating its 150th anniversary this year, yes, happy birthday to them. They form in 1875, but they sort of earlier form in this period in the late 1860s. Something happens in 1871 that sets them back. It's the Great Chicago Fire. 3 of the boats burned down, along with almost everything that you see in this image. And so the Great Chicago Fire reshapes the city, and it especially reshapes our lakefront, and in ways that encourage us to think about the lake and the waterways more recreationally. There's more park space, there are lagoons. matters to all of you right now. You'd be getting your feet wet if we were here in 1868. We are right here over those train tracks right now. If any of you have been to the South Asian Gallery, if you saw Paradise Lost before you came in here, you're walking over those train tracks. So the debris from the Great Chicago Fire allowed us to build into the lake. And so you see by 1893, when we have the Columbian Exposition, the waterfront and the shoreline are a big part of what we're trying to show off to the world. This is our big reintroduction. Daniel Burnham, Frederick Law Olmsted, who do the architecture and the grounds respectively, they're very much thinking of Lake Michigan as being a feature of the fair. And I love this lithograph, this image of the fair looking from Lake Michigan, because you can see how much the grounds and the waters of the fair are interacting with Lake Michigan.
Where are we?
This is Jackson Park. So
Okay.
that view that you always get looking at the statue, usually you're looking from here to the east.
Okay.
But this is all Jackson Park.
Where's the Art Institute?
The Art Institute is way over here. It's
Oh,
on the curtain,
come on.
I'm sorry to say.
Oh, okay.
But the
Not a
Museum
good
of Science
lithograph.
and Industry. But
Okay,
anyway, so what I love too about this image is all of the maritime travel happening in this. So that is a big element of the fair. People take their yachts all the way from New York. Canada announces that anyone taking their pleasure yachts on Canadian canals will not have to pay their toll if they're going to the World's Fair. And the Chicago Yacht Club very much rises to the occasion. World's fairs are often opportunities for international yacht clubs to get together. And the Yacht Club put some official paperwork together in 1893 in order that they can entertain the yachtsmen coming from around the world. They specifically say that they want to be able to entertain the visiting foreign and domestic yachtsmen in a manner befitting Chicago's high importance as an industrial port. So there's no differentiation to them between the recreation and the industry. It's all about how important the waterways are to Chicago. I mentioned the Chicago Yacht Club, hugely important to the development of sailing and yachting in Chicago, and also, to this talk. So thank you to any Chicago Yacht Club members who are here tonight. You have a fabulous historian, Betsy. But this is one of the Chicago Yacht Club's early buildings from 1902. This is very close to where it is now on Monroe. The Chicago Yacht Club, like I said, forms in 1875. They have their first regatta that same year. There are 37 members in that first year. There are about 1,400, more than that today. And it's a lot of familiar names. The McCormicks are involved. Robert McCormick II has 2 yachts himself. Bertha Palmer, when she ends up in England after the death of Potter, she goes to Cowes Week, which is a very important regatta along the Isle of Wight. But this is by no means Chicago's only yacht club. There are Chicago yacht clubs all up and down our shore. Here are the Burgees of just most of the Chicago yacht clubs. And since I know we have members in the audience, I'm going to do my best at this right now. This is Belmont Yacht Club, Calumet, Jackson Park, Burnham Park, Corinthian Chicago Yacht Club, Diversey, Museum Shore, South Shore, and the Chicago Yacht Club. Thanks, guys. And, that doesn't count. Wilmette and Hammond, Indiana. Detroit has one of the oldest yacht clubs in the country. We think of New York and New England. The Detroit Yacht Club forms in 1839.
Wow.
And yachting, boating on the Great Lakes has a very old history.
So is the Chicago one the one on Monroe?
Yes.
Okay.
So the one on Monroe that you go past that has that kind of
Yeah.
look.
Okay.
That's the Burgee that's on the bottom. Burgee, that's the yacht club's flag.
Oh.
It's a vocabulary word I did not know before I worked at the Chicago Maritime Museum.
I'm not going to learn these words tonight. I'm just going to enjoy.
So something I was thinking about, as we talked about putting this program together, 1848, the year Caillebotte is born, is a very important year for Chicago's maritime history. I thought we could look at 2 of his contemporaries who are working in Chicago, how they were painting the waterways. These are 2 pieces from the Maritime Museum's collection. Let's see. This is by Albert Fleury. He was a French artist born in 1848 in Le Havre, and he comes to Chicago in the 1880s to work on the auditorium building on murals, and immediately makes this career for himself painting Chicago sites, the river, the L tracks, areas that were considered, not worthy of painting. And painting the Chicago River in this period would be like painting an expressway today.
It's very, it's kind of impressionist with the reflections and the atmospheric effects in the 1880s.
Right.
So he's channeling the
yes.
French tradition, the new tradition.
The industry, the smoke, the maritime industry, that's a huge point of interest. Although he's cleaning it up a little bit. This would not have been done in person. I've totally thrown off the scale here. This one is about 16 by 20. This is 6.5 by 10. So this is teeny tiny compared to this one, which would have been done in his studio. This one was certainly done on person in the docks. This is a plein air oil piece. And this is very interesting. You can see how different it is from the other piece. It's also the Chicago River, done at basically the same point. This is Goose Island in 1898. This is another part of the Chicago River in 1899. This is a very interesting piece that I could spend another 9 hours talking about, but I won't. Instead, I will just tell you a little bit about James Bolivar Needham, the artist behind these 9 paintings. The top 5 are part of our collection at the Chicago Maritime Museum. The bottom 4 are here at the Art Institute. Now, James Bolivar Needham, I think, is one of the great Chicago artists. He was born in 1850 in Chatham, Ontario, which at that point was the end of the Underground Railroad. His parents were born into slavery in what is today West Virginia. They travel up the Ohio River, join the Underground Railroad, are ferried to Canada, where James is born. But he grows up, very restless and with a huge interest in boats. So as a 16-year-old, talks his way into working as a deckhand on a lumber schooner on the Great Lakes. And of course, Chicago would have been the major port at this time. So he winds up in 1867, settling here permanently. And for the rest of his life, until 1931, he works as a janitor, a caretaker, a gardener, and spends his mornings and evenings painting these little plein air, tiny, jewel-like views of the Chicago River. And they're maritime in unexpected ways. He backed all of his paintings with shipping crate, which is how actually we were able to attribute ours, because there weren't terribly many artists painting the Chicago River using shipping crate to back their canvas of their painting.
And ours have that on it too. Ours are also on the shipping crate.
All of them are on the shipping crate.
That's cool.
Yeah, he rarely signed the
American
front of his
art.
painting.
Don't know anything about it. Sorry.
What
They're
could
here?
you do?
Oh, okay.
He, exhibited here back in the 1890s. Laredo Taft, great Chicago sculptor, head of sculpture for the World's Fair, longtime teacher at the Art Institute, was one of his big proponents, and he exhibits him here, exhibits him at some of his traveling exhibitions. And he's raved about for this period in the 1890s. And I think you really see that his background as a deckhand, his knowledge of these vessels, like with Caillebotte, having a first-hand understanding of these vessels completely change how you're painting them and how you're approaching them in art. Now, we're going to pivot a little bit. We're taking a sharp turn as if we're in a racing skiff right now, to racing. Just history, very interesting, something that Caillebotte depicted often in his paintings. And there's really this moment that an interest in sailing and racing explodes both in America, in the UK, and in Europe. And this is the first America's Cup in 1851. So this is a race organized around the Isle of Wight by English yacht clubs to commemorate the opening of the Crystal Palace, the World's Fair in England. And they invite the New York Yacht Club to visit. The New York Yacht Club interprets that as being invited to race, and so they sail across the Atlantic Ocean in the schooner America, which you can see behind me, and they join the race and win the race. And this race becomes known as the America Cup. It is one of the oldest international athletic competitions of any kind. The trophy that you see
It's
here.
such a weird trophy.
It is a really weird trophy.
It's like, what
It's just
is it?
a ewer. I mean, it's
a ewer.
It is a 19th century ewer by Garrard and Company. 1848 is when it was built. Yeah, it's called the Old Mug, like old long sign. I'm sure just old mug. People in the know would know. But
for winning? That's like a booby prize.
It's the oldest trophy for any international athletic competition. Fun fact.
Wow.
So
Okay.
this is still ongoing. It's one of the most prestigious yacht races, although we have another very prestigious yacht race right here in our own backyard. Of course, the Mack race, the race to Mackinac. That's happening this weekend, tomorrow. This is the oldest freshwater race in the world. Also a very interesting history. The first Mack race is in 1898. Two members of the Chicago Yacht Club both have boats, the Siren and the Venena, that are built by the same boat maker, and they want to see who is the better boat, who got the better work. And so they organize a race. They get 3 other people to join with them, and so 5 boats go the 333 miles from Chicago up to Mackinac. That first race, they made it in 52 hours. This Saturday, when the boats leave, the fastest time will probably be closer to 20. This is one of the 2 trophies, or there are several awards that you can win. This is one of the older trophies. This is the Bowl Trophy from the 1920s. There's also the Old Canoe, which is the older trophy. Interesting iconography, right? You can see Native Americans.
It's hard to read. Can you?
Yeah, so
pull
it's
it out?
Chicago Yacht Club, Chicago Mackinac Trophy. And then I'm also going to point out the turtles that are right here. Everything on the bottom, those are the names of the different ships that win, or the boats that win. Every time you win one of these races, your name gets added to the base of the trophy.
Okay.
And so the turtles, of course, are of reference to the Potawatomi word for the Great Lakes. There's a lot of indigenous imagery that you see in Chicago rowing and racing that obviously you do not see in France.
No.
And so, I mentioned, right, that the Mack race is this weekend. They're doing all kinds of interesting things because it's the 150th anniversary of the Chicago Yacht Club. So tomorrow at 3 o'clock, if you want to head to the, anywhere on the north side on the water, basically, you'll have an excellent view of the Skyline Sprint, which is the cruising class race tomorrow afternoon. They're especially going close to the city to commemorate.
So how long? I mean, how many miles did they go?
333.
Okay.
And there's also an Ultra Mac where you start from Port Huron and do the entire Great Lakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with Caillebotte on the Seine at Argenteuil, 7 miles, 7.2 miles. So it's a little different in his ambitions, but I'm showing you now 2 paintings that Caillebotte bought very early in his career. As you remember, he started collecting his friends to help them sustain their careers as painters, and the 2 he bought very early on in 1876 were the Monet you see on the left and the Sisley on the right with the regattas. And Sisley was English, but he spent his time in France, and he's showing which is so different than Caillebotte's. Let me see if I can get the pointer. It's really hard to do this. So this is like 6 or 8 people on manning the boat, and Caillebotte will have
team.
much. Yeah, he will have much different. The boats he's going to design, and he designs 20 in the short period of time that he's living in the Petite Gennevilliers, this suburbs about an hour from Paris, or it's actually just 30 minutes from Paris, from the Gare Saint-Lazare, where he will settle with his companion, Charlotte Berthier, after 1889. When his brother marries in 1887, they had already bought the property and were there at Argenteuil along the Seine, and then he's going to settle there while his brother remains in Paris. He will live there until the end of his life in 1894 at the age of 45. But this is what I find fascinating, because you saw the earlier water sports, but he's really changing. So when you think about water sports of canoeing, rowing, those are more democratic. Those are, you don't need expensive equipment. You can just go out there, and he's showing, you saw the rowers, his friends, his buddies. But when you start doing yachts, it's just different. You have to have a lot more, you have to be wealthier, let's say. And so he and his brother, he is accepted into the Cercle de la Voile de Paris, so the Yacht Club of Paris, which actually meets at Argenteuil in 1879. Monet had been accepted much earlier, but he gets taken off because he doesn't buy a boat, he doesn't race, and it's kind of like, really? So he's out of the picture, even though his interest in boating remains, and he and Caillebotte are often talking about that. But Caillebotte really throws himself into yachting and regatta racing in a way that, is regatta racing, is that just like two things that mean the same thing?
A regatta is a series of races.
Okay, so I should just say
You can
racing.
say regatta or racing,
Okay,
either way.
not both. He throws himself into it like he does when he started painting, and as he does when he started stamp collecting, and when he starts his rose and orchids and all of the things that he gets passionate about. He becomes not only a racer, but he designs the boats that he is racing. The boat you're seeing now, we're not sure which one it is, but his boats were often named after English, like Inez, the Condor, which is kind of that's kind of a naughty name because it's a play on words, Condor. If you know French, I'm not going to say it, but it's just, kind of bawdy humor among men.
I mean, as many
naming
boats
their
are
boats
today,
after,
right?
Yeah, named after women. Why? Why are boats feminine? She wants to know.
I say it when I say
It.
boat.
Okay, well, we're going to remain neutral on this. But and his painting, a lot of his paintings are of the water and these boats in the last 15 years of his life. We think of him, as I said, the street scenes, but they become very channeling Monet, but also adding his special touch to it, his interest in architecture. And as Madeline was saying, because he was racing and because he was designing boats, he understood the way the sails go, the way they sit in the water. He's not just a Sunday painter. He is fully immersed in this relatively new passion of his. Here's one of his favorite sailors that he sails with. It's a former shoe merchant who comes to the Gennevilliers, the Petit Gennevilliers area, and lives near him, Émile Lamy, and he goes with him on the races. He's in the boat with him many times. And Caillebotte has a very strong friendship with him. You see him in this photograph. Caillebotte's on the left with that very strong jawline, talking to his neighbor now, and in the painting that represents that. And then this wonderful, let me see if I can get it back. Oops, here it is. I love this one. He did it for his brother's home in Paris on the Rue Scribe, but he's showing Lamy's two boys in this sort of wonderful sort of pastoral of the boats at this on the Seine with that little funny looking dog that's probably his Caillebotte's companion's poofy dog. And then this one, which we end the exhibition with, where he's really loosened up his fluidity of his brush. You can see the heavy impasto used for what we would think about as reflection, so it's sort of anti what you'd expect. But there he is on the boat, the roast beef. He had a boat called Gloria, but he never actually sailed it. Somebody else sailed it, which is too bad because I would have loved to have talked about that boat. But this was roast beef, which was really his most successful boat, and the boat he has at the end of his career that he did many races for, and he was very successful as a racer, as a yachtsperson, as one of the leaders of the yacht club, written about in the magazines that we have in the exhibition. You'll see the journal of the Cercle de la Voile de Paris. And I just love the fact that he was so interested in that he never painted his brother's children, and the reason we have the legacy of Caillebotte and the descendants is because of his brother Martial, who is the only one of the family who marries and has progeny. But his nephew is wearing a yachting cap that says roast beef on it. It's so cute. It's so cute. In the Tuileries Garden, just giving you a glimpse of his sense of humor and also his love for children and dogs. And here he is in his one of his houses at Petit Gennevilliers. He builds a shipyard where he can have the boats constructed. Here he is a design. So he's not making the boats, but he's designing them. And then they go to the there we go. They go to the Luce shipyard in the 1890s. That's what you're seeing on the left. And on the right, you're seeing roast beef being built, I guess. Being built? Yeah, with this deep hole on it. And it's not that big. What I love about this is his brother Martial, who takes up photography in 1891 and is also a member of the Cercle de la Voile de Paris, and he's not living out there as Caillebotte is, but he's coming out there on weekends. He's still involved in sailing, not as much as Caillebotte, but he takes these wonderful pictures of kind of life on the shores. And you see roast beef on the top right. That's roast beef. You'll see it a few minutes later. And I just, I love the fact that they're all men. I don't love that, actually, but they are all men. And so I was talking to Madeline about it. I was like, what's the deal? I mean, come on. And then she's like, oh, no, there were women involved in yachting. And so tell us about that, because it wasn't happening in France. It's another one of those.
In the Great Lakes. So even within America, the Great Lakes have a reputation for being unusually open to women on the water. Women sailors, women lighthouse keepers, women working on ships. There's this story where in the mid-19th century, a captain from the East Coast from New England comes to Chicago, and the vessel that he's set to work on, his steamship, has a female cook. And that's like such a superstition. He's not going to do it. He tries to fire her, and the entire crew threatens to fire in protest. She was a really good cook. And so the woman behind me, this is Evelyn Wright. She sails the sloop, the Lady Eileen. She is part of the first all-female crew for the Mack race in 1905. So that's only 7 years after the first Mack race at all. One of the first Mack races to happen. It's her and her friend Sarah Carey. She was only 27 when she did this. You can see she attracts a lot of media. People are amazed that this young woman in a skirt is going up in the rigging and on the mast and everything.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is that a boating costume or is that?
Yeah, that's exactly what she would have worn,
Okay.
actually. Yeah. You're just very aware of your environment, I guess. But she is asked, is she nervous about this? I mean, this, as you pointed out, 333 miles. I mean, that's a long race and very difficult sailing. Do we have any sailors on Lake Michigan in the audience tonight? Raise a hand, a few of you. So you know that the weather on Lake Michigan comes out of nowhere. We had the Coast Guard come to the museum. We talked a little bit about water safety. In some ways, ocean sailing is easier than on Lake Michigan because they can predict their weather more easily. Illinois, I don't know if you guys know, is very flat. And so the storms come out of nowhere and your situation changes really quickly. And this is what happens to the Lady Eileen. They encounter a storm. They have to go into shore for repairs. But they are able to make up the time and end up coming second in their class. And she says, she wasn't afraid at all. She's been sailing since she was a wee bit of a girl. And this is 1905. So the idea that already a woman who's 27 in 1905, there was enough of a culture in Chicago that she would have been sailing as a wee bit of a girl. That isn't happening to any degree in France the same way.
Not at all. There were about 180 people in the Cercle de la Voile de Paris at the time of Caillebotte, and They were like the Rothschild. They were very, wealthy bankers, lawyers, some of whom were Caillebotte's good friends from Paris who would come out. And in this photograph, you see Martial, the one on the third from the left, and then grumpy Caillebotte next to his brother Martial. And then over on the right, there is a woman, and it's been a recent author of a biography, thinks it is Charlotte Berthier, his companion. It could be, it's very hard to tell by this, but it is a woman, and she is in a photograph of a yacht club, so, there it may be. I just wanted to remind all of us that this Seine River, so the yacht club, his home, his shipyard is across from Argenteuil. And Argenteuil and Chatou are connected together. The Seine runs by it. And this is the restaurant Fournaise, which is very famous because the luncheon of the boating party. Supposedly, this man on the right is Caillebotte, has been identified. That surprises me because he's smiling and he's with other women and he's he's very social. This is Renoir's great masterpiece anyway. But the point is that this place still exists. In many of the presentations, I've been talking about how Caillebotte's Paris still exists. This still exists. The Maison Fournaise with this taken, they've redone it. You can have your picture taken on the same trellis looking over the Seine with the little boats. And they've reconstructed roast beef in 1894, and it ended up at this Maison Fournaise. So if you go to Chateau Argenteuil, you can have your lunch, and you can go over to the hangar and see roast beef and get a little skiff and go out on the Seine and pretend you're in Paris, or you're in Petit Gennevilliers, Argenteuil in the 1890s. Still today, the Cercle de la Voile de Paris is still a very prestigious yacht club that meets at Argenteuil, that has their club quarters there. They still race. It's still 7.2 miles. Again, it's a very small, but the boats are, still some of the designs probably that Caillebotte did are probably still the basis for some of these boats, as far as I know.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
who knows?
Roast beef was very influential.
And, I just wanted to point out that they have a cat at the Cercle de la Voile de Paris that they called Gustave.
So, I want to say we did this completely on purpose, and it was not a happy accident that we did such a perfect week for Chicago sailing to do this talk.
Of course.
So we talked about the Mac race. Next week is also Venetian night. I don't know if anybody's done that before. That's another sort of yachting tradition in Chicago that goes back to the 50s. People decorate their boats for a boat parade. Very fun to see. But the Mac race obviously is the really historic, really interesting thing. You got to go either tomorrow, find some spot, go to Belmont Harbor. That's supposed to be a great place to see the Skyline Sprint, our cruiser class, tomorrow. Then, of course, I don't know, many Chicagoans have had that experience of not knowing when the Mac race is happening, and you end up on, the beach in Rogers Park and just see all of these sailboats go by. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way of remembering, other ways of using Lake Michigan besides just
can't
a
you
background.
follow it digitally? Because I remember someone was looking on their computer. And
yeah, you can go, the Chicago Yacht Club, if you go to the website they have for the race, you can follow along the entire thing, see where all of the boats are. Different local news stations live stream it. Chris Habermal, who was on our public access show at the Maritime Museum this week, is the voice for CBS of the, Mac race. It's a very cool, very uniquely Chicago event.
And do painters do it? I mean, do painters go out there and paint it?
Oh, people absolutely still paint. Yes,
Okay,
you see a
good,
lot of people
good.
painting the Chicago
Because that is quite
yachts.
beautiful, just
Isn't
seeing
it?
the skyline behind it. How many boats usually?
This year, it's almost 300. So this is the
Whoa.
biggest year ever.
Oh, my gosh.
Big year because it's the anniversary of the Chicago
Right,
Yacht Club.
right.
But it just gets bigger and bigger every year.
Okay. Well, I think on that note, which is both a plug for the Mac race and for the Maritime Museum.
Oh, yes.
And for coming back and looking at especially the last gallery in Caillebotte, I think we'll end. And we will thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Gloria.